Welcome to the latest OpenChain webinar. This time we're going to be having a look at something around SPDX. So in the new SPDX 3.1 drafting process, there's a services profile, and that allows things like potentially export control to be addressed inside the SBOM format. We want to make sure that people can understand these developments in SPDX and these developments around SBOM. It's important to our community. The OpenChain community is, of course, often using SBOMs for license compliance, often using them for security. But we also have a work group on export control, a study group on AI, and plenty of regional work groups where people are looking at all the different ways SBOMs might be useful for them. We're very lucky to have Gary O'Neill here to talk us through this services profile and SPDX 3. As usual, this call is recorded. Most of our audience watches things async. They catch up by the recordings due to the time zones that we are spread across. We have a presence on every continent apart from Antarctica, as far as I know. But before we get started, let's have a look at the antitrust policy notice. We show this at the beginning of every meeting. You can find the full antitrust policy on the Linux Foundation website, and if you're from a member company, you can ask questions of our counsel, Andy Updegrove. That's all the formalities covered. Now it's time for the actual presentation itself. Our webinars are informal, so don't hesitate to use the chat and raise questions. Raise your hands and make sure that you feel like you're in a room here as Gary walks us through. So Gary, without further ado, your floor is open. Shall I stop screen sharing and hand over to you? I just noticed Gary's still muted right now, so I'm just
There we go. Okay, yeah, go ahead and stop sharing.
all right.
Yes.
Very much indeed.
So thanks everybody for joining. I see a few familiar names out there. So good to see all of you on the call. And this probably be a relatively short update on the services profile. So there'll be plenty of time if there are, any questions on the services profile. And before I start, I just want to mention that we did just make a kind of a pre-announcement. The SPDX 3.0 release candidate 2, we just released the model over the weekend, and you'll be seeing more information in about a week. We have some work to do getting some of the documentation on the specification ready. So look for that, and on the next general meeting for SPDX, we'll be presenting some details on what you'll find in RC2. But this talk is primarily about the services profile, which is targeted for the next release of 3.1. And let me just set up to do the slides. Give me just a second. Share the screen. And all right, can you see that okay?
Yes, it's showing perfectly. Thank you.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the services profile. We formed a team back in April of last year. Interesting story on how this actually got started. It actually was instigated by the OpenChain project. Prasad on the OpenChain mailing list was asking about communicating certain types of data as it relates to software as a service. And I suggested this may make for a good profile in SPDX, and Prasad and myself and 3 or 4 other folks. Nisha has been a big contributor. We've had some good contributions from Cisco in the project as well. So we've been working on it for just a little while, almost a year, I guess. And It's really focused on software provided over a network as a service. And what additional information do you need to satisfy certain use cases? As you know, SPDX is a standard, for data about software packages. We are now extending that to be more systems level, including services over the internet. So what is the data that's relevant to that? One thing I want to mention, there's another group that's doing very, very similar work. It's in the CISA organization, the US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. They have a cloud SBOM working group, and we're quite fortunate to have Nisha working with us because she's also in that SBOM working group. So it helps keep us in sync and make sure we don't diverge from other standards activities in this area. So in terms of the scope of what we've decided to do, is one of our first meetings was to decide on the scope, is first of all, it would be complementary and not overlapping with the CISA work. So if some of the work in CISA has already been done, we'll adopt it. If we feel like more things needed to be standardized that's not covered by CISA, we would cover that. We certainly want to make it compatible with existing SBOM formats, especially the SPDX software SBOM formats, and capture essential information such as certificate authority details about the service. And I'll be going into a little bit more detail on what that looks like. And as I mentioned, the target release is SPDX 3.1, the next minor release after 3.0. Here's just a little bit of an overview of how the approach we're taking to develop the spec itself. We started with the scope. We develop high-level use cases, define the personas, the steps, the goals of each of these use cases. Then we prioritize them using kind of a cost benefit analysis. So kind of a simple spreadsheet that we use where each of the team members voted on what we think the effort would be and what we think the benefit would be, prioritize those. Then we go into the detailed use case and start to actually model it out and build the specification based on that. I should mention, as every project within the SPDX organization, it's completely open. All the minutes are published in our minutes repo. We welcome contributions from anybody. You're all welcome to join in the discussions that we have in the meetings. You're also more than welcome to comment in the Git repositories or just on the mailing lists. When we organized the use case, we came up with a few categorizations to help us organize the use cases we wanted to go after. So the first category is customer data governance, and the goal of this, the primary goal of these use cases, is to make sure that the customer data is secured appropriately. And there's just a few examples of the type of metadata that we'd be capturing in the spec to support that, mostly around data, and geographic location tends to be important in certain cases, like privacy as well. So the second category is supplier infrastructure governance. And here we want to ensure that the providers are following the appropriate practices to mitigate risks, security risks, and reliability risks, and provide, basically provide highly available service, or at least a repeatable, dependable level of service. And in this, some of the data we'll be capturing is dependency relationships and protocols that the services use. And we also have service availability, that basically describe what the uptime goals, the service level agreements are, information like that. specific category for vulnerability discovery and management. So very similar to the software. In fact, we'll be reusing a lot of the software vulnerability data, but extending it over the network for software as a service. And then regulatory compliance to ensure that the service providers are not violating any of the regulation. And this really comes, a lot of this comes into geographic tracking of the data. But just to give you an example, things like privacy, certain jurisdictions have much stronger privacy regulations than others. And being able to have information on that is key to some of the users of this standard. So a few examples of targeted use cases. One is to trust the identity of the service provider itself, basically authentication. Trust that the data is transmitted and encrypted appropriately, and this gets really deep into the encryption infrastructure. Know that the software vulnerabilities are being taken care of. So, for example, on this, just to go a little bit into an example, if you remember the Log4j, a lot of companies were querying their IT organizations. Are we using that version of Log4j? Do we have a problem? Well, the idea is to extend that out to software as a service, where you could basically query the service providers of a software service and see if they have those same software vulnerabilities within their infrastructure. Another example is just to provide information about the platform that the service is hosted on, identifying service dependencies, services that use other services, and understand if any of the services host user data in geographic regions that violate particular regulations. So what we did is we prioritized all these different use cases, and the one that came out on top, mainly because it was the easiest, not because it was the most beneficial, but the one that we started with was to find out if a service is using any other service. So a fairly straightforward use case. This is in the customer data governance category, and the persona is more on the procurement side of the users of this use case. So in terms of the basic steps, they would go through: the consumer queries the primary service provider. The primary service provider would inventory all the services used for the consumer. They would list any third-party services and the services and inventory. So these are just direct third-party dependencies, and optionally provide third-party dependencies. Of course, this is dependent on their service providers providing that information. So that would be an optional step. So with that as the use case, let me just show you how we're modeling this. One thing I want to mention, this is a very early draft. It's still under review by the team, and there's already some good comments open. So this is very likely to change. Now, I'm starting with the diagram, which is this is a UML class diagram. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. I'll give you a short course on how to read these. And this is also from the existing, what you see on here is the existing SPDX 3.0. This isn't yet the services profile. So within this diagram, with each of these boxes here is what we call a class, and it describes something. And then each of these fields in here are different fields that are in there. So an element has an ID, it has a name, it has a summary, description, comment. So you can imagine how this would be laid out in an SPDX document. You would see data for each one of these fields. And then in the square brackets, this tells you whether, if it shows up as a 1, it's required. If it shows up as 0.1, that means you can have 0 or 1, or in other words, it's optional. If you see 0 star, it means you can have many of them. And so the ones that are important to this use case is we have this basic element. And then when you see this arrow here, agent is a type of element, which means the agent gets all of these properties and can add more to it. But what an agent is something that operates on a service or software. It could be an organization, it could be a person. It could be even software could perform as an agent. So that's what an agent is. And then we have relationships, and the relationships, of course, relate elements to each other. So it has a from and a to and a completeness. So this is just from our core SPDX model. Now let's get back to the services profile. So we were talking about that use case where we want to find out about service dependencies. First thing we realized is we needed to be able to describe a service provider. And a service provider really is just a type of agent. So, but this is saying, this arrow again is saying that this is a type of agent and it gets all the fields of the agent. Agent gets all the fields of elements. So it has a name, you can have a description, but we thought we needed one more thing, which is a provider URL or URI. Basically, something that would be a unique identifier for the service provider that's commonly used in when connecting to these service providers or describing the service providers. So that was our first edition. The second edition is a software service, which again is a type of an element. So you can have a name for it. It's got to have an ID. You can have descriptions, and it can have relationships, of course. And the software service has one additional field, which is the provider. So a software service has to have a provider, which is of type service provider. So basically, we're just adding a service. We're adding a service provider. The nice thing is you'll see that we really didn't invent too many new fields. It's reusing a whole bunch of the fields from 3.0 and just adding two new ones. We did add one more thing, which is a relationship has a relationship type. We added a relationship type called service dependency. So with the relationship type, the service and the service provider, we now have the ability to satisfy that use case. So this is how it would actually be used. When the consumer queries the primary service provider, they would use the service provider class and the provider URL so that it could identify it. When the primary service provider inventories their services, it would create a list of service objects. And then when it provides the third party, it could use the service dependency relationships to further extend, into dependencies of dependencies. So that gives it a little bit of an idea. Now I'm going to really get into the weeds a little bit here. I apologize for going into a lot of detail on this, but I just wanted to show you what this actually looks like in practice. So this is a typical SPDX 3.0 format, JSON format. And you'll see, here's it has a type, which is a service provider, ID, creation information, the name, the provider URI. So all of these fields relate back to the model picture I was showing you before. And basically what we're starting off with is a service provider. I just made this up, Acme Company as a service provider, and it's providing the Acme service. So service provider, software service. And then let's say that it has a dependency on Amazon. So there'd be another service provider for Amazon, and Amazon is providing, let's say, the AWS service. Let's say the Acme decided to host their service on Amazon Web Services. So that's what it would look like to add those two. And then there's the last thing we do is add the relationship that basically says that the Acme service has a service dependency on AWS, and that's it. It does fit on a page. It doesn't quite fit on a slide. I tried to squeeze it on a slide, but I thought that might be a little too hard to read. But it really can be done quite simply in terms of how to satisfy that use case. So backing up, what's our next use case to analyze, which we'll be starting off probably in the next meeting. We're going to take on one that's a little bit more involved, which is the trusting the identity of the provider. This is in the supplier infrastructure governance category. It has the personas of the end consumers of an online service and the service provider itself. And we haven't detailed out the steps, but you can imagine it involves a lot of querying of public key infrastructure, information, and basically making sure that there's no issues with the technical identity provide information that's being used in the service. So that's just a quick overview. I would like to end this with a couple of thoughts that you might take. First of all, if you're interested in the services profile, join us. We really are getting in the most interesting part of the spec development, which is the actual detailed modeling. And you're more than welcome to join the discussions. We have a mailing list. We have a meeting which has the URLs here. The other thing I want you to think about, especially in the OpenChain group, SPDX really is just the plumbing. It's just the data. We have to think about the process so we get the data right, but we don't specify the data. We don't standardize. I mean, we do specify the data. We don't standardize the process. This is where OpenChain comes in. So I think there's an opportunity here for the OpenChain organization to take the data that we started with, much in the same way we took the license data with SPDX and created a process standard around it. I think there's an opportunity for doing that here as well. And of course, the last thing is, if you're a service provider, please adopt the standard. That'll help the consumers of the service. If you're a consumer, think about asking your providers to provide the standard, and encourage them to do so and make use of the data once they do provide it. That's it. Just a last couple of references on my last slide. I'll mention one thing, the working document use cases, you'll see it really is a work in progress. It's not formatted very well, and only the ones that we've already taken on, the detailed analysis has the detailed steps. But you're more than welcome to look at the document and comment on it. I have a link for the prioritization spreadsheet where each of us voted on the different spreadsheet items for you. And the actual model description is in a branch in the GitHub repo. If you use this link, it'll take you right to the parts of the model that we've already agreed on. And there's a few pull requests in GitHub where we have some in progress standardization going on as well. So that's all I had to present. I'll certainly stop, see if you have any questions.
And everyone, remember the floor is yours. You can just raise your hand or you can just unmute and ask away. While people gather their thoughts, I just want to say, Gary, thank you so much for this overview and also for the call to action on the OpenChain community. I have one starting question, which is, I believe SPDX 3.0 is getting very close to release. It's at, is it release candidate 2? So,
Yes.
yeah, which is a great milestone, by the way. Congratulations to
Thank you. Thank you.
Not easy to get something that big ready.
It was a heavy lift, yes.
Yeah. I guess my question would be, and this is reading, I guess we'd say in English, reading the tea leaves. This is guessing the future. But my question would be, when it comes to something like 3.1, the services profile, is that something that might be included in an update to SPDX in 2024, or is it something more in 2025? And I realize this is a guess as opposed to something.
Well, that's even harder to predict than the final release of SPDX 3.0. As you mentioned, RC2, we just published the model for that, and as I mentioned earlier on the call, so we're very excited about that. A lot of hard work from a lot of people. I see Kate's on the call. Kate and I were working furiously over the weekend to get everything ready. So what we're doing on RC2 next is we're actually taking that through another standards body to get an OMG standard aligned with it. That's probably going to take 2 or 3 months. I expect we'll get some feedback and some changes. So 3.0, it's really hard to predict for certain because it depends on how the review with OMG goes. maybe 3 to 6 months. And I'm thinking 6 months after that for 3.1, but boy, it's really hard to predict.
Yeah.
I will say though, that there's a lot of parallel work going on in 3.1. So I don't think it's not like a complete linear. We finished 3.0 and we start on 3.1. There's some 3.1. I know, I see Kate's on the call. Kate, you've been working on 3.1 for quite a few months on some of these other
Yeah.
profiles.
So the hardware profile, the safety profile as well are going forward, as is the operations profile. And so work is already undergoing on those as well as the services. So anyone who is interested in these areas, you can dive in and start working on making sure that what emerges is going to be fitting your purposes and your use cases. Just a quick data point, Gary. Bob set the expectation that it's going to be in their review for 4 weeks, and if there's nothing too drastic that comes back, we might still be able to work towards hitting the next hitting April timeframe if possible. The question is how fast the serializations go, and I think most of the serializations are going to be pretty straightforward, except for the tag value.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to need to work with the SPDX Lite community pretty hard to make sure that what we evolve tag into will work for them. The safety profile, people very much care about it as well, as does the AI and the data right now. So we need something that's going to work to make it easier to express in a straight text form, but still has some of the hierarchy that is going to be needed. So it's going to be sort of a subset, and it's only going to be for certain profiles, is the view at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what's sort of sitting in the to-do list between now and when we can put a 3.0 tag on it. Does that help, Shane?
Oh yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Kate. And I see that this has already provoked several comments in the chat as we talked about these things. We've got the comment from Kubota-san and a comment from Fukuchi-san. So Sony wants to dominate the conversation. I'm kidding, guys. I'm kidding.
Well, they're wonderful participants in our monthly meeting with the Asia folks, so I'm very glad they're commenting here.
So Kubota-san's comment is, he's pointing out it's only his opinion. And he says,
Yeah.
adding a URI to the external identifier type would make it easier for service providers to be represented by organization plus external, is that identifier, instead of creating a new service provider class.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. This actually hasn't come up in our discussions, but it is kind of interesting that we only added the one property. I guess the what I would have to think through is could we still do the service provider relationship that may require an agent or a subclass of element, but definitely something to think about. The other thing, maybe there's something in between there where we still have the service provider class, but we don't have a property for the URI. We use the external identifier. That might actually be better. So you got me thinking. There's definitely something in there that I think that can be improved, but need to think about it some more. Very good thought.
And Fukuchi's son's comment that I just read is, the originally SPX focused on open source packages. It seems that service profiles containing commercial services. That understand correct? I would say yes. I also say that we are evolving the name of. We're keeping the brand of SPDX and the trademark, but we'll be with 3.0. We'll be calling it System Package Data Exchange, so that it can cover more than like data, data sets and hardware eventually, and AI and the services stuff that Gary's working on. So you'll be seeing a slight shift in our branding emerge quietly until we're ready to announce 3.0, and then system will be the focus. So if you see something shifting like that, you'll know it's just us trying to get everything ready for 3.0.
Yep.
Thank you. Can I make a comment?
Of course.
This is Kubota. And I think it will be, it is difficult to discuss here about the SPDX 3.0 specification, but I'm planning to contribute some JSON schema to the SPDX repository, SPDX playground repository. And so I will contribute to make a pull request next week or so. So I'd like to discuss about that in near future.
Yes, yes. The pull requests in the playground are very welcome. And you don't have to worry too much about the playground is intended to be a place where we could almost brainstorm different approaches to the serialization. So you don't have to worry about it being too terribly accurate or precise. It's a good place just for ideas as well. So yeah, please contribute to the playground. I should also mention, very related, we in the SPDX Tech Call on Tuesdays, we will be starting back up the serialization discussions. Yes, so that's very related, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I found some issues when outputting as just JSON. So I'd like to discuss with you and with the community.
Yes, that would be great. That would be great. Unfortunately, the serialization meeting's not at a very convenient time for Japan. It is, let me see, I think it's tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Pacific time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Tomorrow
For
is
you, which is
national
not
holiday in Japan.
Yeah.
very inconvenient for Japan.
Gary, while I'm off away on vacation next month, maybe you could just dedicate the Asia call or have an
Yes.
earlier Asia call to talk about the serializations.
I think that's a great idea. Yeah, I think serialization is definitely going to be the next topic. And for tomorrow's serialization, we're just getting started again talking about it. We were so focused on RC2 up until now. We're trying to decide if we need to have a separate simple JSON format in addition to the JSON LD. So it should be a lively discussion. There's a lot of opinions on both sides of that, so it'll be interesting. Definitely look at the minutes when we publish those, and you'll see where the discussions were going at least. And then we can, as you mentioned, Kate, let's take a good part of the next Asia call and cover some of the serializations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question related to the service providers and tooling vendors. Are there any indications of who might be introducing support for SPDX 3 in terms of the proprietary side or on the open source projects?
So Yocto is moving towards it right now, and SP and Zephyr will both move to it in terms of the open source projects to prove out the build flows effectively. And a lot of the things that were put into the build profile came from Yocto, so that should make things much more robust. So we should have some good examples from those two open source projects, probably by the time we have 3.0 out. There is libraries right now in Python and in Java for working with it for those who are working on tools. So any tool vendor who's already used the libraries for 2.3 has a pretty easy migration path. It's just changing an option. We've Sonatype has said they'll be moving to it. And so we should be getting that. And a dependency track said they would move to 3.0. So let's see if they actually do, which is one of the tools that people want to use. People are really quite interested in the safety profile, so I think they'll move some other tools eventually too.
Yeah, we got a lot of participation in the spec from different, both commercial and open source vendors. So I think we'll be in pretty good shape on adoption with SPDX 3. Yeah.
Hello, this is Takashi
Sorry,
from
it's,
Toshiba. I have one question. Sorry, excuse me.
Oops. I was just gonna type an answer to Prasad. We just finished the presentation on the service profile. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, no, my apologies. I was having some connectivity issues since I was trying to connect through my browser. I didn't have the desktop. So I'm glad that yeah, it got over. I'll probably let the gentleman Takashi proceed. I have a question on SPDX 3.0, but I'll come to that later.
Okay. May I ask a question to Gary or Kate-san?
Of course,
Yes,
please.
Okay. So at first, at the beginning of this talk, so Gary-san shows us this is highly based on the discussion about discussion in the CSAT's service third profile. Software transparency in third environments. In this document, surely, so I can see some definitions and how to say considerations like service locations or so. And in this document, the discussing member is so many people, but in the list, the Steve-san, Springett-san from WASP is involved in this discussion. So my question is, this service profile for SPDX 3.1 has some efforts to align the specification for Cyclone DX, specifically, so service profile of Cyclone DX was so. The reason why I ask you is the Cyclone DX 1.6 doesn't seem to any kind of data field about the geolocations.
Yes. So we that's one of the reasons we wanted to leverage the CISA work, was that we thought that could help keep us in sync with the with Cyclone DX, but only to the extent where Cyclone DX is using the same field definitions as CISA. So if they deviate, we still may end up with some differences in the standards.
So
yeah, feel free to apply pressure to Cyclone DX to align with us and CISA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
I understand.
like I say, we've done what we can to align, but it takes two sides to do the alignment properly.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Please go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I have a question. This is for Kate or Gary. I know we were talking about this maybe just a month ago before or just after the holidays. I don't remember. But the SPDX 3.0, do we have like a confirmed date for when it's going to get published outside for external consumption?
It's public now in the model, and it's pretty solid. And so we've got drafts emerging for the spec, and we could use help with plugin support and for autogenning the PDF. But the content, the draft content is there, and it is available right now for external consumption. We just need, and like I say, and we want to know the bugs right now if you spot problems, so we can fix them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's public, and it's usable, I think, for at least for getting the JSON LD schemas going. It should be fine.
That's very good news. The reason I asked is at least in our org we do have plans to upgrade. So currently the one that we support is the 2.3. So once we go 3.0, the first profile, at least the data model that we are looking at is the build model. That's where I think we will first look at those properties and make sure if there is anything that
like I say, it's a good window right now for you to go and look at it. It's solid enough to look at, and if you see that something significant has been overlooked, yes, please chime up, and better yet, a pull request.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Just one last question. You mentioned about cooperation with Cyclone DX. How is it in terms of the general feel for cooperation around development at the moment? Because there's a lot going on, and I know we're seeing a lot of guidance around the world from governments saying, "Oh, we like this or that out of software bill of materials."
Yeah, I can, we were, both Kate and I were recently in FOSDEM, and this came up, I would say, in every talk that I presented and almost every discussion. There's a lot of the users of the spec would really like SPDX and Cyclone DX to work better together. And we've always been, the SPDX community has always been open to collaborating and synchronizing. In fact, if there's things that we could add into the spec and improve the spec to where we didn't need two standards, we'd certainly welcome that as well. But we've always been open to collaborating. We've had kind of fits and starts with Cyclone DX, commitment to collaborate. So we've had some really good collaboration. What was it, 2 or 3 years ago in Texas, one of the Linux Foundation meetings, and that kind of waned after a month or two, and then we had another little bit of work where things happened, and then that kind of waned. So in the long answer, I'm sorry, but in the FOSDEM, I had like 3 or 4 different offers where people said, "Okay, I will work with you. We'll work on collaborating," but I have yet to hear back from them as to actual setting
Yeah.
up any meetings or anything. So I don't know. I think, just like us, they have a lot, it's a volunteer organization, and I'm sure they're very focused on things, to make their spec better. But I, for one, am more than willing to work with the Cyclone DX community to help bring these specs closer together, because I do think that would benefit the overall community quite a bit.
Right, and such that we have some alignment on our definitions. When we actually talked about this on the tech meeting a little bit, we were told, oh, we can go and read their stuff and then align to their stuff. And so this is why I'm sort of saying it takes two parties trying to meet in the middle, not just one party just doing whatever someone else is saying, especially when we've got a fairly large constituency right now.
Yep, no, that makes sense, and thank you very much indeed. Well, unless there's further questions, I think we've had a very busy, very fruitful, and very information-rich webinar. Thank you so much, Gary, and Kate, thank you for dialing in as well. Thank you to the audience for some great questions and ideas. We'll be putting this recording up soon, so the rest of the community can drop in and have a look. And if you do have follow-up questions, open them on the lists. Take care, everyone. Be happy, be safe, be well.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for listening in. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, and thank you again.
Thank you.